And hello and welcome to another episode of Startup Caps, your eye on startup capital movements in Africa with myself, Tanya Habimana. This week we look into a booming landscape. Africa's education sector, which is undergoing a digital transformation, with EdTech startups playing a critical and important role in shaping the next generation. From providing affordable access to quality education to personalized learning experiences, EdTech startups are paving the way for the new generation of learning on the continent. Let's now take a deeper look into this exciting sector.
The global edtech market is on a meteoric rise, expanding from $115 billion in 2021. It is projected to scale up to $549.6 billion by 2033, growing at a compound annual rate of 26.32%. Leading the charge is North America, while extended reality technologies weave immersive learning environments into the fabric of education. African edtech, surpassing the $500 million mark in 2020, is on a trajectory to hit approximately $1.3 billion by 2028. This growth, at over 15% CAGR, signals a robust commitment to harnessing technology for education across the continent. African edtech witnessed a 646% venture capital boom in 2021, reaching a high of $291 million, 6% of the continent's total VC funding. Though the investment pace slowed, down to $97 million in 2022 and $23 million in 2023, the sector's drive for innovation endures. Nigeria is at the forefront, securing over $255 million in edtech funding, with an extraordinary $240.5 million in 2021. Egypt and Kenya follow with $73 million and $21.3 million respectively, championing the education technology revolution. M&A activity is crafting a new narrative in Africa's edtech sector. The acquisition of Get Smarter by 2U Incorporated for a grand $130 million spotlights the enticing opportunities within this burgeoning market. Africa's edtech exits are sparse but signify an evolving ecosystem ripe for more substantial investment and acquisition opportunities as the industry matures. In the arena of funded startups, the presence of female co-founders shines at 30.4%, heralding a significant trend. EdTech becomes a beacon of inclusivity, propelled by initiatives that empower and support women in leadership roles. Looking ahead, the EdTech landscape is aglow with potential. The focus sharpens on digital content, STEAM curricula, and mobile learning platforms. With AI at the helm, we're steering towards an era where education is universally accessible and engaging.
And now that we've heard a little bit more about the EdTech sector, we're going to get insights from the funding side of the equation. I'm joined for this conversation with an investor-investee relationship. I have Wim van der Beek, founder and managing partner at Goodwell Investments, joining us from the Netherlands, and the CEO and founder of Instill Education, Alim Ladha, one of the ventures that Goodwell invested in. So I'd like to start off the conversation by getting more insights into what you do.
So Instill Education is a platform that allows us to train the next generation of great teachers in Africa and then support them throughout their lifetime. We have an incredible opportunity on the continent. We have declining learning outcomes, and we have an opportunity to train our teachers to support this incredible youth bulge that we have on the continent. 90% of young kids cannot read for meaning by the end of primary education, which is really complex, a challenge, but also an opportunity. And so that's what we do. We train teachers and we support them throughout their lifetimes.
So then coming to you, what gave you the confidence that this was a good investment to make?
So when we look at the opportunity in education, we see an immense opportunity over the next decades of training the next generations of the population, which everybody knows in Africa there is a young population and it's growing. And in order to sort of benefit from the demographic dividend that we see coming for the next decades, you do need to build that human capital. And if you want to be part of that opportunity, then looking at who are the ones building that human capital, those are the teachers. So if you want to reach as many young people as possible and provide them with the best possible education, the way to do it, which has a huge multiplier effect, is to train the teachers. And that logically would provide a very scalable model if you can understand that the value that's being created by supporting the education of teachers, then automatically investing in those business models will have a huge ripple effect, and therefore also with a high scalability also will come a huge benefit, and that in our philosophy will also turn into a huge commercial opportunity. So for us, commercial opportunity and the benefits to society and to the people that are served through these business models are the drivers for our investment thesis.
Now, education, EdTech, for the African continent is a primary need, as Wim has just given us the reasons for. But despite that, when we look at the funding landscape, we still see fintech driving most of the capital, and education not getting as much as it would necessarily need. I'm quite curious to get more understanding on your own funding journey. Was Goodwill your first check?
Goodwill wasn't our first check. I think our first institutional checks came from the Stein family office. They operate under a fund called Proceed, and the Optimizer Foundation, which is a Swedish impact investor. The funding environment, you're right, seems to be often geared towards the fintech teams, particularly right now, and my fintech colleagues will probably share more with you in other sessions. We are seeing an increasing interest in EdTech on the continent. I think the framing around the challenge is we have 54 different education systems, so you effectively have 54 curriculums, we have 54 approaches, we have 54 languages, and more actually to deal with. I think the opportunity discussion around this is there are commonalities across these markets. They all struggle with quality of teachers, supporting teachers for growth. Parents are looking for better education for their children. And so ultimately there is an opportunity to scale across the geographies, but I think that opportunity is still untapped. And I think this is where we're excited when Goodwill joined us, because that meant a relatively large investor coming and understanding that, yeah, there are challenges across the continent to scale an EdTech business, probably very similar to the fintech business, which has 54 different regulatory frameworks to deal with, but actually there's an opportunity as well.
And from an investor perspective, Wim, how do you look at that? The fact that we do have a fragmented market and that this could cause challenges in the ability for startups to be able to scale, to grow beyond their original markets.
Yes, that's a problem that we encounter in other sectors as well. So it's not unique to education, as Alim also mentioned just now. Where we see solutions for that fragmented market is where we look at interoperability, like we do in fintech. So there are a number of models that can actually be developed in one market and then replicated into the next few markets based on the similarities between those markets. And quite often we find that the similarities between markets are much more than people anticipated if you look at it from a distance. And that's also why it's important for an investor like us to be based locally, and that's what we are. We have teams on the ground making those investments from our different teams in Southern, Eastern, and Western Africa. And by being very local and by looking at what is possible locally, we do find many more similarities between markets than one would initially assume. Of course, yes, there are different regulations, and you do need to, for instance, apply for different accreditations in different markets. But we also see that the replicability of models that have been developed in one market versus what is going into the next few markets is actually very, very good.
How do you deal with the aspect of affordability for the provision of services? And I think that this is something that we see quite a lot, this tension between wanting to be profitable but also wanting to provide access with the more, let's say, human sectors. When you think of health, when you think of education, how do you look at this?
So I think in EdTech, I think what is really exciting is that we actually have technological solutions that actually drive better pedagogical outcomes, better learning outcomes. And so I think the role of technology in education really becomes important. Now, I want to say this importantly, it's not the answer, but it's actually the enabler that allows us to think about, well, this portion of the experience needs to be delivered in person. And so let's think about this in-person experience very thoughtfully. But this portion can actually be outsourced to technology to actually reach people out there. And I think the hardest part for us has always been to find that right balance, guided by our academic team who understands really well, this is where the balance lies. And that allows us to drive the cost down, drives affordability up, and then also drive access up at that point.
Yeah, and moving forward on that as well, still on the subject of scalability, I actually want to stay with you. Are you looking at other markets than Africa?
To be honest, my heart is on the continent. I'm from the DRC. And so when Wim asks me, where do you go next with this, I want to go into Francophone Africa because that's where my heart also is. And so for now, our focus is going to be on the African continent. This is where we understand the local context. This is where we understand where technology helps and doesn't. This is where we've built good relationship with the regulatory bodies. And so for now, we're staying here.
And then where to next for you? Do you see other opportunities within the education and edtech sector that you would be interested in?
Yes, we do. So we like very much what Instill has been building, and we continue to support that. So we will continue to invest also in Instill to support them on their journey. And their journey is a very ambitious one, setting the target of reaching 1 million teachers. And can you imagine what kind of multiplier effect that would have on the numbers of students that can be reached? That is really fascinating for us. We see other models emerging also, and we see different directions in EdTech that are very promising. One, of course, is breaking that infrastructure challenge by bringing affordable education across digital channels, combining that in hybrid models with improving the facilities. There we see still a lot of growth possibilities, and we are actively looking at opportunities there. What we're also seeing is that with increasing use of technologies such as AI and virtual reality, we probably will see the landscape for EdTech changing radically over the next 5 years. And we're very excited to be part of the first movers in those, to participate in the first movers in those developments.
Yeah, and you make a good point when it comes to infrastructure and connectivity, because with your earlier point with regards to understanding which portion needs to be in person and which portion needs to be digital or can be outsourced digitally, then you have the issue of, well, infrastructure, connectivity, the digital divide. Not everybody has access to this. How do you look at this? Is this somewhere where public-private partnerships can come into play?
So I think I'll first say that this is not a problem that we just discovered, right? So as a continent, we've known about this digital divide. We've known about access to smart devices, which often is the channel by which we are pushing content or learning experiences to people. And I think that is slowly being solved in pretty much all markets we're operating in, right? Now, when you design a solution, you also have to keep that in mind. So teachers will tell us, I have a smart device, but I don't have any data, right? I have data in school, but I don't have it at home. And what that means for us is you design offline solutions. So download the data while you're at school, do your learning while you're at home. And I think that's been the approach we've taken. There are solutions that are more public-private partnerships. Most of the telcos on the continent are now offering zero-rated solutions, which allows them to drive a bit more stickiness to to their platforms, to their networks, which also then solves a lot of our challenges. So we are exploring these things, but I also think that we also have to look at where technology already has proven and given us solution spaces such as offline access to content and to learning.
Lots and lots of opportunities. I want to say a big thank you to the both of you for joining us today. Wim van der Beek, founder and managing partner at Goodwell Investments, and the CEO founder of Instill Education, Alim Ladha, one of the ventures that Goodwell invested in. And now we have the opportunity to hear directly from EdTech entrepreneurs who are transforming the African education landscape. Joining us is Ayo Nihinlola, CEO at ULesson, and Eric Pignot, founder and CEO at Anko Education. These inspiring founders are going to share their journeys, their innovative solutions, as well as some of the challenges. And that's exactly where I'm going to start. Coming to you, Eric. What has been the biggest challenge in setting up Anko?
Well, I think for us, one of the biggest challenge has really been about understanding what are the type of teachers that we have in our schools. So Anko Education is a group of schools, group of private schools. We try to increase access to top universities. And we have a new innovative way of learning in our classrooms. We needed teachers that were able to go through the journey and teachers who are able to learn every day with us across the journey. And that has been a big challenge.
And teachers for you would then be a key resource / skills that are necessary for the venture to succeed.
Absolutely. I think everything starts by the teachers today. We're not at a stage, we talk a lot about technologies coming into the classroom. We talk a lot about distance learning. But today in the K-12 space, nothing has replaced the role of the teacher. The role of the teacher is evolving, though. We used to have very teacher-driven instruction in the past, where a teacher was the sage on the stage. Now we want the learner to be at the center of education. We want teachers to be more guide on the side. That totally transforms the role of the teacher in the classroom, which I think is a great way to go. But this transformation also requires lots of support and willingness and work from the teachers.
Absolutely. Ayo, what about you? What has been the biggest challenge in setting up ULesson?
Yeah, it's a number of them, but I think top of mind, the first would be just the infrastructure, because ULesson is the digital solution. So I would say internet connectivity is definitely top. Most areas in Nigeria still suffer from low or limited internet connectivity, and you see how that can directly impact how students are able to engage or use the ULesson solution. So I would say maybe internet connectivity. And very quickly as well, I think as well, just the traditional mindset change as well, and the approach to digital learning. So you still find a lot of parents still not sure about the effectiveness of deploying digital solutions for their kids. Thankfully, I think COVID really helped kind of accelerate that, but you still find that challenge. So constantly, you have to prove that this is a viable way for a student to learn. This is something good, this is something better. And that is working as well. We do that by just showing the results, showing the testimonies of students learning through ULesson. So I'll say infrastructure and also just a mindset change. Those are some of the challenges that will be encountered.
And that's an important aspect, actually, the mindset change. It speaks to adoption. I'm curious how it was for you in terms of putting forward your schools and changing the way that things were done previously.
Well, I think this is one of the key element, and it starts by having people who actually want to embark on that journey. So one of actually our most important process that we had to set up at Anko Education has been our recruiting process. Today, we're very specific on the type of people that we think will blossom at Anko Education. And so this is probably where we're putting our largest focus today. And I think we have right today an incredible team of teachers and support staff at head of school that can support our learners all across the way.
Yeah, now I want to come back to your earlier point, Ayo, on infrastructure. Particularly when you're deploying a digital solution, how do you mitigate against this?
Yes. So at ULesson, we found several creative ways to mitigate against this. Again, one of the things that we've done is to try to deploy more offline solutions. So right now, we have like a custom-made digital learning device, like a tablet, and we would put all of our content offline on the tablet. So when a student purchases these devices, they will not need to access internet anymore. They could just learn offline. Again, one of the creative ways we've found over the time to be able to address this infrastructure problem. But again, the more offline you can go, the better in cases like this.
Is this something that you've had to deal with as well, infrastructure?
Absolutely, and I mean, the example that Ayo is sharing resonate very much. When we started our first school in Cameroon, we actually had dongles with 2.5G connection. It was, WhatsApp did not exist at the time, or was not accessible, sorry, in Cameroon. Today, we have actually high bandwidth connection in most of our countries. The cost is still very high. We sometimes have quality challenges with fluctuating connection, but overall the improvement is phenomenal. And that's essential because today in education, a lot of new opportunities are coming from the, you know, when you speak of artificial intelligence or just having tools to support the teacher's work in the background, such as classroom management system. So having great internet connection in our classes enable really a new type of experience for our learners in the end. So yes, I connect very much.
I can see in your eyes. One of the founders on the show alluded to the fact that if you're starting a venture on the African continent, infrastructure very often is a challenging point where you end up having to build 5, 6, 9 other companies to support that initial one company. So Ayo, in light of that, has your fundraising journey had to change or pivot in any way in terms of what you needed funds for as you progressed and realized that there were more things that you were having to build and to put forward?
Not really. What we've also done to be able to mitigate around this is to also partner with internet providers and network providers as well in Nigeria. So we are able to deploy some partnership that is able to make accessibility easier from this perspective, but it's never the reason why we would go to raise or to fundraise. We try to focus more on the core of the problem, how to solve the problems for the student, as opposed to trying to fundraise to solve these other problems. They are so deep that it will be difficult to fundraise specifically to address that problem. So again, other creative ways that we could find in the confine of what we do, like what the example I'd given, or just partnerships as in the industry as well. We'd rather focus on that as fundraising for this purpose specifically. We need much more resources and fundraising to be able to cover this infrastructure problem, because they're not exclusive to just ULESN or education itself. So you'll be tackling a bigger problem than what you set out to build initially.
Yeah, good points there. And Eric, how was your fundraise journey?
To build also on the infrastructure part, you know, we talk about technological infrastructure, but as schools, we also need buildings that are designed and well designed for education. Our fundraising has been mainly based on venture capital funds, which has a high expectation of returns, which is really not suited to investing in infrastructure. And so we often have this type of dilemma of how do we best use our capital? Should we sometimes invest a little bit in infrastructure to increase the experience of our children, knowing that we won't get the return that we expect? So right now, part of our strategy is going to be to continue to invest in our teacher recruitment program, in our school management systems, but also have a specific fundraising to look at how to improve our infrastructure.
For bringing that to light, actually. I want to come back, Ayo, to your earlier point on partnerships. How are you looking at partnerships with governments, for example? Because I think that's probably an area where infrastructure can be solved for. Yeah, how is it working with the government?
Yeah, so yes, this is the 5th year of ULESN in the industry. So I think now we're beginning to get more reception from the government, to begin to get more inquiries from the government. And yes, it begins to look more positive. Right now, we've deployed several solutions via the government to specific areas, states in Nigeria. And this is a very important point. To truly make an impact in education in Nigeria, or even Africa, the government is a big stakeholder. To reach millions and millions of students, if we're trying to go by our own approach, it takes a longer time to do that, but government can help accelerate this. So yes, again, because we've been around, we've shown some evidence that we have like an effective product Right now, we're beginning to work more closely with the government. We've deployed ULESSON across several states in Nigeria. Again, this is in partnership with several governments that are open to having this conversation. But again, it's not the easiest, but it's getting better. It's much better than when it was.
Okay. And from your perspective, the government, a help?
Well, if we take a step back, I think, if we consider education in Africa, we're just talking about probably the biggest challenge in the world in terms of magnitude. So there is no, if we look at the funding that's going to be required to accommodate the demographic growth in the next 30 years, there's just simply no solution for a single player. It cannot be just the government funding the required growth and increase in quality and capacity. It cannot be just the private sector. It has to be a collaboration. So it will come, it's inevitable. How it will come will depend, and I think a lot of initiatives are starting. We've been discussing, for instance, with the government in Gabon to try to start a model of public-private partnerships. A lot of attempts are also being organized in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in Ghana, and I'm sorry for all the countries I'm forgetting here. But as you say, I think the key role of the government is one, regulation, making sure that the sector operates on the right standards. The minimal standards sets the bar. And second, the government has those access to land, sometimes to infrastructure, and the private sector has access to funding and capacity to scale. So the combination of both, I think, can be a very interesting opportunity. And we're exploring those opportunities. There's still a long way to go to make it work, but it will happen.
Fantastic. Well, a big thank you to the both of you for joining us today. That was Ayo Nihinlola, CEO at ULESSON, and Eric Pignot, founder and CEO at Enco Education. What an exciting episode. This is where we leave it for today. EdTech is booming, and so is Africa. This was Startup Caps, your eye on startup capital movements in Africa. We'll do it again next week, but the conversation does not end here. You can connect with us on social media. You'll find us on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok with the handle _StartupCaps. And you can find out more about the ventures and startup founders, as well as the investors featured in this week's episode by visiting our website, www.startupcaps.io. That's it for now. See you next week.